We'll start off introductory questions.
Yep.
Tell us who you are, what you do, and what brings you to New Zealand.
My name is Jack. I'm from a trio called Ternion Sound. We're a dubstep trio from Minneapolis, Minnesota. Here in New Zealand on tour, going to Australia next week for the rest of the tour. But yeah, just playing a couple shows, doing Auckland, just did Christchurch and Queenstown, played Twisted, played Rolling Meadows, and then there's a bunch of shit coming up in Australia too.
So you've been there for a little bit now, right?
6 weeks, I think, as of next Thursday.
And so far from what you've experienced, what are your thoughts on, bass culture here?
It's very different from the US, and it's also different from Europe. It's like its own kind of unique space, because in the States, like a big thing is what kind of music is popular. So in the States, like I was just saying a second ago, we don't have a lot of drum and bass. We also don't have a lot of psytrance. And then like at Twisted was like all psytrance, and then some like bass music, but more, I guess, European feeling bass music. And then like some like post dubstep stuff. There's some jungle too, some drum and bass. Yeah, in the States, usually it's like glitch hop, halftime, Nero, kind of like the US bass scene is all downstream of like West Coast beats, integrating with like the kind of sound design-y Nero stuff and like bro step and whatever. So, and that, a lot of that's not present here, which I like a lot because I prefer like UK derived dance music and stuff.
What are your thoughts on the impact that bro step had on, dubstep in general, to where people recently started saying 140 to kind of differentiate themselves with that?
Well, it's funny because all three of us in Ternion used to make like bro step and rhythm and really heavy, like I was making really heavy, like almost metal tear out stuff. And the other two guys kind of got their start playing heavier stuff. I got into dubstep just before it turned into that, like in like 2007, 2008, through like the Roscoe Essentials mix and then like Argon Records stuff and like Babylon System and Noah D and SPL back in the day. But I kind of latched onto the heavier stuff because before dubstep, I was a gabber DJ. So I was always looking for like really heavy, extreme music. And then it started to get like crazier and more extreme. And I really liked it. But even back then, I had this attitude of like, I think we should be calling this something else because it's not. Because when I was looking for music back then and I'd search dubstep, I would find all of the like UK dubstep from like 2007 and before. And I was trying to find like the heavier, darker stuff. And I was like, you guys, we should be calling this something else. But I was just some like Minnesotan kid, you know. But I think that, you know, it took off in the States. The name never changed. And because of that, you know, everyone in the US, and I don't know what it's like globally, but in the US, if you say the word dubstep, people think Skrillex. And people think of these like, there's like a few like, there was a Key and Peele skit, I think, where they were making fun of dubstep and they, you know, he like puts it on the radio and they make these ridiculous faces. It was like in car commercials and like all the stuff, but it was that like Skrillex sound. So that's what people think of when they hear the word dubstep. And you can't put the genie back in the bottle, you know what I mean? Like, we're kind of past that point. So I think it's goofy that you now have to like differentiate yourself from it and say like, oh, I don't make dubstep, I make deep dubstep, or I make 140. Even though historically dubstep referred pretty much to like the kind of stuff that we play, maybe a little more, well, quite a bit more sometimes, percussive and deeper and stuff, because we still play pretty heavy and like sound designy music. But it's this thing now where like you almost have to like, I don't know what the word is. It's like, yeah, it's like retconning kind of, you know, like in movies or in like, I think it's from comic books, that term. but we're like relabeling ourselves, even though we should just be calling ourselves Dubstep Act. And I think the history is like all convoluted just because, yeah, there was never really a point at which people decided, you know, we should rebrand the genre and, you know, all of that. I think really the biggest impact that all of it had, though, is just like the stupid semantic debate. Because if that didn't exist, American dubstep wouldn't even be considered part of the same realm that the rest of everything else is. So none of these arguments would be happening, and like it would just be considered a different genre, often some other place. I think the one good impact that it had, though, is like I think that production quality has gone up generally. I think people treat it more like almost scientifically. You know, there's a lot more people getting really deep into unique kinds of synthesis and sound design. And I think that's added a lot of interest to the genre. I also think that in the States, it created enough of a commercial industry that you can have a career in it, which is really necessary if you want to write more music and be able to like commit to it. You have to be able to make money off of it.
Have you been in this since you were 14, right?
Yeah, 20 years.
And
Yep.
Did you originally start with dubstep when you started producing?
No, the very first thing I got into producing was like breakcore, speedcore, like really extreme, fast, distorted electronic music stuff. And then I got into gabber, which was like just more danceable than speedcore, basically. And I did that from like 2004 to like 2012-ish. So there was some overlap when I was doing dubstep. But when I was doing that, there was never a hope for me that I would have a career in it, because there's no scene for that stuff in the States. Really, there is, but it's tiny. And there is things going on in like the Netherlands, but it's really insular. And even with other kinds of electronic music, I think before 2008, really before like 2010 through 2012, in the US, at least from my perspective, there wasn't much of a hope or a chance that you were ever going to have a career in it. So if you were making it, it was just because you really liked it and you just did it out of pure passion. But I think because of that, a lot of people like eventually get really burnt out and exhausted from putting all of their heart into something that just kind of bleeds them dry in life. It becomes really expensive to, like, especially back then, buy more records, get a hold of equipment, whatever. And then to not have like a return, I think a lot of people got burnt out, got jaded. But yeah, like dubstep exploding and the whole EDM thing exploding kind of created more opportunities for people to have careers in it. And it almost created like sort of a middle class of musicians in the US. But my concept of the history is not perfect, because I do know that there were a lot of career electronic musicians before that time. I just think that in the 2000s, there was kind of a lull period. That's a whole rabbit hole to go down there. Yeah.
Do you feel like there's much of a community back home?
Yeah, there definitely is. I think that it's like a two-sided coin, because on the one hand, I think because there's money to be made in it, and now there's a lot of money to be made in it, especially if you're into certain styles. There's a lot of people who are doing it just purely because they know they can make a lot of money doing it, and it makes it feel like less of a community because they don't care as much, actually, I think, about making the music, blah, blah, blah. And I always get nostalgic for that time when there was no chance of making money and people were just doing it because they loved it. And that was a really cool period of time. But it's like a two-sided coin, right? Because now I'm able to do it more because I am making money off of it. But community-wise, I think there's a really solid community in the US of people who are into specifically our style and like more, I guess I would say UK, European derived electronic music. It's a little more underground, but I think it's pretty tight knit, and there's a lot of good people doing it. But I think most of the interest is in others. Yeah, the biggest difference that I notice here is everything I've played, from Twisted to Rolling to like the Queenstown show, the Christchurch show, is that everyone here seems to be really engaged with the music in a way where they like know the tunes. You can tell people know when something's coming in because they can hear the intro when it's being mixed, you know, and that energy and that anticipation really changes the way that a set goes and how the room feels while you're mixing, and it changes the stuff that I'm going to play, because at home, for instance, in the US, I feel like there is quite a bit less people who are like really collectors with it and are really listening to it on a level where they know all of the tunes and they know in advance. So when you're playing shows in the US, I think you're more going for shock factor and like, oh my God, this is a crazy drop. Versus here, it's been easier for me to play like a wider range of stuff because people have their heads. There are more heads here. They like a wider variety of things. So I don't have to stay so limited to like the most known tip of the iceberg tunes, which even for us, I mean, we're pretty underground, but like there's a tip of the underground iceberg, and then there's like all of the fucking weird shit that when I play it at home, people just, there's just blank stares a lot of the time. But here, there's huge excitement, you know. Even at Twisted, like I played jungle towards the end of my set for like 30 minutes, and everyone was losing it the whole time. And if I play jungle at home, it's just
Crickets.
crickets, yeah.